As a child, I used to draw all the time. I think my first memory, I'd say around 5, I was drawing, and I knew I was always going to art college. That was just there was never going to be anything else. It was just art college. That's what I wanted to do. The stimulus of my work, I suppose, would be very much about people and how they feel, and it's really important for me when I'm working with people that I find out their story, their life story. I need to know that. I need to know where it's going. I don't always know when I work what it's about, but afterwards when I look back at it, I can see that. So for example, I did a residency in Kilkenny Arts Office, and there was a man that used to come in. Well, he used to walk up and down the road, and my whole interest during that residency was the people outside the window, and I thought that I could draw them as they walked up and down, but they walked up and down too quickly. And I watched this man walking up and down, and eventually he came in. We managed to persuade him to come in, and he came in and he allowed me to draw him. So I did a series of drawings of him, but it wasn't just about the drawings, it was about him, who he was and why he was there. So he and I did a lot of speaking, and I did a lot of drawings and stitch drawings, and eventually I took that work on to a piece that I put up in a stable, pinned a drawing of him up in the stable in threads. But that's really important to me, that I get to, that there has to be meaning. In the same way, I worked on a present for art for the Courthouse in Kilkenny. I drew the objects, I start drawing ideas, but I draw in lots of different ways. So I draw in sketchbooks, I draw on pieces of paper. I walk around and I look at things. So in Kilkenny we have the cathedral, and we have, like those tombs in the cathedral and those bodies that really interests me as well. So I go and draw those, I go and photograph those, and I would start collecting imagery and maybe stories as well. In the courthouse there's a prison downstairs, so part of the hanging structure came from the window in the prison downstairs. So again, I would go and draw that, and I would look at that. So there's a huge amount of thinking, and it goes backwards and forwards. It's never, if I knew what I was going to make from the start, there would be no point making it, because it would be nothing new. I have to wait, and I have to do all this work, and it's a lot of work. It doesn't just happen. It's huge work. So I do the drawings, I collect my information, and then I start building things and making things. So this was the final piece that I showed them. But there would have been lots of these pieces and lots of different versions of this piece till I figured out how this was going to work. And this was the mock-up that I gave them in the end. There are some artists I really love. Alice Meyer, her work is just stunning. Paul Moss, his work is just beautiful, and the textures and the layering, it's just fascinating. A young artist, Caoimhe Kilfeather, really beautiful and very simple structures that she's making, and using light in her work, which is very beautiful. Dorothy Cross. Is drawing my way of communicating? I don't know. It's not a way of me communicating with everybody else. It's a way for me to understand and to see. Drawing is a communication between yourself and the drawing, and your brain and your body has to be involved. It's work, and it's hard work, but it's also really rewarding when it works. But I never know exactly what I'm going to do. So I've done a huge amount of experimentation with stitch, and taking that drawing into these bodies here. And this is part of my experimentation at the moment. It's part of finding out what happens, what works. Like we were talking about colour earlier, and that these pieces started to have colour. A lot of my early work would be very much black and white. And it's quite scary using colour for me, but it's also fascinating what's happening with these pieces. So when I'm developing ideas, the process would be, I suppose I've spoken a little bit about it, but it would be very much about, there would be a lot of thinking at the start, and a lot of reading books and researching if there's an idea, but also just walking or swimming maybe and letting those ideas come in. That it isn't that you just go straight to paper. So that would be part of the process, and then ideas start to come in and I start working on just experimenting and playing with things, with materials, with drawings. Often in my studio, because my studio is a little bit like a sketchbook, so there could be lots of ideas in this space, and I think it's a really good idea when you're working on a project that you don't just keep working on one piece, that you keep moving and coming back and looking and coming back. So that would be very much part of the process. And often a piece that could be sitting for a year or two there suddenly can become part of the work again. I don't think you should, I think we make the mistake of over finishing work, that you work on one piece and it has to be perfect. But you should have at least 3 images that you're working on and keep moving between those ideas. So it's allowing ideas to come in, and sometimes I get stuck. And when I get stuck, I probably, often what happens, because then it'll get into my head and I'll try to be working it out, often what will happen is I'll wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and there'll be some idea resolved there. So I can't wait to get back into my studio then, because I know what I'm going to work on. And as long as your work is honest and that you are honest about where your work has come from. I mean by honest that it's your work, you've worked through it, that you have given it everything, that you haven't seen somebody else's work and you're not just repeating that work, but also that it comes from within you. It can't be somebody else's idea. So for me, it has to be absolutely my work. There has to be an integrity to the work. Well, I suppose the walls for me work like a sketchbook, and things just I put things up on the wall, and ideas that I might be working on are things that I've left for the moment. They just get put up on the walls. So there would be so many. I have boxes of ideas and things, but even things like this piece here, it's a stitch piece. It would take a long time to make, but I would love to have time to go back and work on something around that as well. And I leave it there just to remember that technique and how that works. These are stitch pieces, and they are coming off. I use a water soluble, it's like plastic that so I make them up. I start with my drawing and then I work off that drawing for these pieces. And at the moment they're very experimental and very much about about the body and about the body being moved and not having the body doesn't necessarily have choices. But they also this comes from life drawing, and so I was teaching a life drawing class and I had the model set up in a certain way, and I just went, oh, that really works for me. So that sparked an idea of I'd like to have a lot of these and them falling and being moved without her choice. And I love that this is the first time really that I've started working with colour in this way, which is a very new departure for me, and I'm still not necessarily comfortable with that. It's still very much experimental as to where that will go. But I love, when the camera goes over this, when you see the light and the shadows and, what's happening there, that really excites me. And that shadow behind really excites me.